Some of us are physically disabled, and some of us are emotionally disabled. Some of us are both. We might not feel emotionally disabled, but certainly our attention is caught up in things that are difficult, painful, problematic. Making the decision to live a monastic life is a choice to be vulnerable, to be helpless. Even the way we tie our robe, we're always having to hold it together. It's a bit like if you've ever sailed a boat, you're always supposed to hang on to the ship with one hand and work with the other. That's why you're called a hand, because you only have one free hand. Similarly, in monastic practice, I can really only use one hand completely. The other, I always have to hold my robes and keep them on. I have the use of both hands, but the metaphor is that I'm always holding on to my training. I'm always holding and being held by the monastic rules, which consists of dozens and dozens of training rules, giving us direction about how to speak, how to walk, how to hold the bowl, how to wear the robe, how to go through a door, how to interact with those elder in the robe, how to interact with those that are not in the robe, how to speak on Dhamma or not speak on Dhamma. There's a lot of restriction, tremendous restraint, but within that restriction there's an incredible freedom, because it's very, very clear. We know that if we step over those boundaries, there will be consequences. If we step over them a little bit, the consequences are small. If we step over more, the consequences might be more grave. By consequences, I mean we end up hurting ourselves. Our virtue starts to have leaks in it. And that's not conducive to what we are dedicated to. You can't take care of, you can't be in charge of your vehicle. In terms of the commitment to sila, to morality, you can't compromise, because your ship might run aground. You're not seeing what you're doing. If you're distracted by sense pleasure, or if you're tempted in ways that take you outside the boundary of your training, then you become compromised, and the whole vehicle is broken. Your vow loses its meaning, or you've lost your connection to it. Sila is everything. It's the beginning and the ending of the path. To train ourselves in morality, actually that's the bottom line for this practice. The whole training is outlined as Sila, Samadhi, Panya. Morality, concentration, and wisdom. Perfection of virtue is the bottom line. So, when we make ourselves helpless, we're not making ourselves helpless in terms of practicing goodness. Being vulnerable, we're bound up by all these rules. We can't handle money, we don't have control over what we eat. We're dependent on the community to feed us. That dependency means a lot of risk, especially if you're not living in a monastery. When I first left the community after 10 years, I did so because I wanted to live more in touch with the suffering and the problems of lay people, because in the monastery we're quite sheltered. And at the same time, to see how I would fare on my own. I wanted to be a hermit too. And then I decided I wasn't a hermit after a few years. It was a risk, but once you set your feet on the path, you don't look back. It's mysterious how it helps you by unraveling in front of you or unfolding under your very feet, just through the faith and the trust that you have in that which is so precious, like this teaching. there were times when it was really, really difficult. When there wasn't a guarantee, well, there's never a guarantee, but there really wasn't the support that I was used to in the monastery. Being on one's own and being vulnerable, not getting the care that one needs, not getting the requisites regularly, even meals. Very, very hard. So what I learned from that was, what is my commitment to? Is my commitment to satisfying the senses and getting what I believe to be enough? Or is it to something greater than that? Giving up the world means sometimes making sacrifices, taking risks, going beyond what we think are our limits of endurance. One of the paramitas is perfecting patience or patient endurance, perfecting energy, all in the name of perfecting virtue. These all go together. Once you start bringing up one of the paramis or the perfections, they all seem to converge into that effort to realize truth. But because it's hard, it seems to summon us to do more than we ever thought we could. When we start, we don't have to think about all that. We just have to set one foot in front of the other, and the path really rises up in front of us. So when you start out on this retreat, you don't try to do the practice that's going to happen on the 7th day, on the first day. What's in the first meditation, that's all we have to worry about. What's in this moment, that's all we really have to worry about. This moment's practice of purification, of being aware of what's coming up in the heart, focusing on it, letting go, then reaching for the next breath, or just being present for the next breath, watching, cultivating, letting go, again and again and again. It builds up our strength. It gives us a certain momentum. And from that, we develop the ability, the power, the endurance, the durability to go through a greater difficulty that might arise, or more and more confusion in the mind, or more painful memories, or more painful feelings in the body. So many things may come up. Today we stood in the labyrinth. I thought I would read the definition of a labyrinth. A place constructed of or full of intricate passages and blind alleys. A maze, something extremely complex or torturous in structure. The Buddha didn't intend for us to be tortured by sitting here and watching our breath. But we are in a labyrinth. It's a wonderful metaphor, the labyrinth of the mind. We have to really find our way through, and the mind is constantly throwing up obstacles that seem designed to help us lose our way and drag us back into the realm of sense pleasure, or aversion to painful experience, or doubt, or worry and anxiety, or unbearable restlessness, or sleepiness and tiredness and dullness and sloth and torpor. You put it all together and it feels like, does it feel like torture? The Four Noble Truths, they're not two noble truths, they're four noble truths. Why are they noble? They're noble because they're universal. And they're noble because they're timeless. They're principles of life that govern everything that is real, that points us to reality and to awakening. These noble truths are just this, that there is suffering. There's the origin of suffering, the cessation of that suffering within us. There is the possibility of realizing the ending of this torture. And the ending of this torture does not happen through sense pleasure, having our way, or living forever, or being the most beautiful person in the world, or the richest person in the world. It's not through what we possess, or what we control, or through our accomplishments in the world that we will end that torture. But it's through the fulfillment of this path, the Eightfold Noble Path. So the Buddha doesn't ask us to believe this. He asks us to test it and practice and see for ourselves, to ask questions and to inquire. It's not dogmatic. It's not a belief system. It's a practical teaching. That's why we call it practice. Practice and liberation. We see eipasiko opanaiko. We come and see for ourselves by studying our own hearts. We're not just sitting here fruitlessly just as an endurance test. It might feel that way. It might feel very dark and unbearable. But there comes a moment when we sit through that pain without wishing that it would go away, just softening, accepting it, approaching it, looking at it, asking, what is it? Peeling it away. You know how you peel an onion? What happens? You start to cry. When you peel away the layers of our delusion about what pain is, we're either going to cry from the process of peeling, or we're going to cry from our incredulity at what we find, what we discover. Because it is so wondrous. And there it is right in us. It's here. It's not out there. It's not in somebody else's experience. And when we realize the Four Noble Truths arising and ceasing in front of us as we sit silently and observe our own experience, we come to a moment of absolute peace. That's a moment of holiness. No one can take that from us. No one can understand it who hasn't done it themselves. We go through the labyrinth of the mind, not being fooled by all the obstacles, not being discouraged and disheartened. Sure, we lose heart. Sure, we get fed up. Sure, we feel crushed, demolished, lost, unworthy. But we keep pulling ourselves back up and trying again and again and again, repeatedly, tirelessly. It's a heroic effort. It's not an ordinary effort. If you apply ordinary effort, you get ordinary results. But give it your best and see what happens. It's a courageous, extraordinary effort. You might get an extraordinary result. But don't hope for any result except just to experience the real center point within your own heart, like the middle of that labyrinth when we all came together and suddenly we weren't separate anymore. We were like one circle, one little point at the edge of the Ottawa River in the vast expanse of Ontario, Canada, North America, on this western side of the Atlantic Ocean, on the planet Earth, orbiting around the sun in the cosmos. That's us. But we have to get through the labyrinth of the mind to reach that still point within us. Now you think that it's torture for you. There's a very lovely sutta in which an angel comes to the Buddha and he says to the Buddha that he's caught in this predicament of feeling lost not knowing whether to go up or down or which way, feeling the danger of the path, feeling so much fear. And he asked the Buddha, "What should I do, O Lord? Please tell me the way out, the escape from this." So even the devas get frightened and feel shipwrecked and unable to continue. And the advice that the Buddha gave was this: not apart from awakening and austerity, not apart from sense restraint, not apart from relinquishing all, do I see any safety for human beings. The meaning of this is for all of us, not just for the deva. The real escape, the real ending of this torture comes not from running away from it, not from getting up and saying, "I'll just continue doing dana for this lifetime and perfection of the path, the realization of the third and fourth noble truth next time round." But no, we can do it this time by awakening through developing wisdom and release. That means freedom from attachment, freedom from the ego. But we have to take a risk. We have to be a little uncomfortable. We're not used to bearing any discomfort. When we have a headache, there's a pill. When we're hungry, we eat. When it's cold, we turn on the heater. When it's hot, we use an air conditioner. We live very comfortable lives. It's ironic that the real freedom from suffering lies not in going towards what gives us comfort, but in going through this seemingly torturous labyrinth of the mind and coming to that still point. When we have mental anguish, it wouldn't seem natural for most of us to just sit there and bear it. We would look for what would give us relief. Our culture is to run after sense pleasure and run away from pain. But through developing wisdom, we can understand the path that helps us to let go. So we sit with our experience and we try to work our way slowly through the labyrinth to that still place. And we might get there for 1 minute. But the whole point of this practice is to get to that stillness and be in it all the time. That's a lifetime project. It comes through practicing. It's a slow unsticking, a slow disentangling, because we are caught in so many ways. So if we can learn to pull the barnacles that stick to us, or that we are stuck to, one by one. When we start out in life, we're so young and full of hope and dreams, and slowly, as we get older, if nothing goes wrong, by the time we're 30, it will when we're 40. If nothing goes wrong, by the time we reach 40, it will when we're 50. By wrong, I mean nobody gets sick. You've got all your friends, family members. No one commits suicide. No one gets muscular dystrophy. No one gets cancer. No one gets depressed. No one loses their job. No one has an argument with their spouse, their siblings, their boss, etc., etc. No dukkha. People, when I talk to them about the Four Noble Truths, you can't get them to sit and try to watch the mind. I'm not suffering. What is the way out of the suffering? Well, first of all, we have to recognize that there is dukkha. We have to go to the heart and study and see what's going on in there. Where am I? Am I suffering? Well, if you're not suffering, that's wonderful. But if you're suffering, then there's work to be done. And we know the labyrinth has passages, and in the middle there's a stillness. There's a still point. There's safety. What is safety? It's where wisdom arises. It's where morality is perfected. It's where the mind can rest. The heart finds its ease. And there's a process for reaching it. The highest gift that we can give ourselves is this kind of attention to the present moment, practicing pure presence moment by moment, and clearing out the rubbish of the heart. Not only is this the greatest form of generosity, but it's the perfection of virtue, because it's from the pure heart that we can practice purity of speech and the highest form of moral conduct in our daily lives. That's a process, so it's very, very important that thoughts that are coming through the mind are grounded in wholesomeness. We've heard about the carbon footprint. The ethical footprint begins with pure presence, and it has vast implications. So just consider that. What we're doing here is not separate from what we need to do in the world. It is deeply connected, and we have a moral responsibility to carry this practice into our daily lives. Truthfulness. The truth, the parami of truth, is perfected by going deeply into each breath as if that breath were an ocean. It's the ocean of wisdom. You think, well, it's just a breath. But if we dive down into the breath, what do we realize? In one breath, we can understand the principles that govern all phenomena. Every pain that we experience. If you can stay with one breath, you can stay with one moment of pain. Try to go towards the pain, not owning it, knowing that it's not permanent, and slowly inching your way towards the center of it, as if the whole labyrinth arises and ceases in that pain in the knee. Go to the center of that pain and study it and ask, what is it? What is it? What is it? Don't layer it with thought. Oh, it's pain, I hate it. There it is again. How long will it last? Or the fear of it, which is quite natural. Just trying to penetrate to the sensation, pure feeling, again and again and again. That will bring us to a moment of truth, and we might even experience the ending of that pain. Or it might suddenly appear somewhere else. That's the Four Noble Truths. It arises, it ceases. It's impermanent. It has an origin. It does cease. And there's the way to realize its cessation. That's already a little bit of peace. Maybe watching a squirrel run across the ground. Maybe feeling the power of the way the trees reach up to the sky. So we have to trust. If we don't experience peace, we have to trust that there is peace in this process. Sometimes all we can do is just trust one more moment. To get back to what the Buddha said to the angel, there's developing wisdom. That's really the parami that we're perfecting here. Growing in wisdom, we may end up with nothing. When you leave this retreat, what will you tell people? What were you doing sitting there quietly, watching your breath for 7 days, and you have nothing to show for it? But there might be some insight. The development, the accumulation, drop by drop, of revealed insight in the mind is wealth. You can't buy a meal with it, but you can survive a disaster. At least you can sustain yourself through hardship in life, some kind of challenge, some difficulty that arises, with wisdom. And through giving up, through practicing virtue, and through this meditation. So those 4 things are very important. They realize for us an island of safety. that we can really sit on, stand on, walk on, rest on. Even if everything around us seems to be falling apart, there is one point right in the middle that is absolutely still. Samsara will always be there, but we can establish for ourselves that ethical footprint. Develop it, perfect it, purify it, trust it. Then we become so strong. What we love is so pure, so true. It holds us. Just like in the beginning, you wear the robe and you barely hold it all together. But then you do it every day, every day, every day. And eventually the robe becomes like your skin. That this teaching becomes so much a part of your being that you're never without it. Anything that life throws in your direction, you immediately stand in that refuge. And it will always hold you up. If you give it your life,